Thank you, Chad, and thank you everyone for, as Chad says, taking the time out of your busy schedules to sort of join us this morning or this afternoon, depending upon where you are. Chad said something. He said, with any of these sessions, you know, if you can just take one thing away from it, that's good use of time. My philosophy as a trainer, as a coach, is, you know, I want you to take sort of a dozen things away from this session. So I'm very much going to jump straight into sort of the sales training, the sales coaching element, and sort of not waste time in talking about why this is important, or, you know, and those things. I want to give techniques, tools, things that you can take away immediately, implement this afternoon, and start delivering the results. My first slide as an educator is around the learning cycle. David Kolb is an academic, and he studied the way we learn. And the reason I start here is everything we do is about learning, it's about growing, it's about improving. And so everything I sort of think about in this session, I want you to take that back to the practice, take that back into your lives, etc. So for me, the learning circle is a great starting point in terms of understanding how we learn. This webinar is an experience. Hopefully for you it's a good experience, but at the end of the day, I'm going to sort of share some tools, some concepts, some theories, and as we walk away from the webinar, it is important that we reflect. And this is, again, as Kolb said, this is how we learn. We reflect. We think about, okay, what did I like? What do I take away? What were the sort of the learnings from that session? And as you reflect, you start moving into sort of the development stage. You start to think, okay, how might I implement that? How may I use those tools and techniques? And that leads us into experiment. This is the bit where in sales we call it the rubber hits the road. You know, we have to do it. We have to try something different. And as you try something different, as you put into practice something I share with you, you then have an experience with a client, and that experience leads you into reflection. This is how we learn. This is how we go round this learning cycle. The reality, though, is the environment in which we all work, it tends to be pretty hectic. So when we have something that works, we have an experience that works, we tend to just do the same thing again, and we just repeat the experience. We just do what we've done for the last few years. It works until one day it doesn't. And the opposite to that is when we have an experience that doesn't work, we go straight to experiment. We just jump in with, okay, what am I going to do differently? And just try something new. That doesn't really change the behavior, it doesn't really change what we do, it doesn't really change the practice, it doesn't evolve us in terms of learning and sort of moving forward as human beings. So the key is reflect. Coming out of today, stop, think, as you drive home, as you find that 5-10 minutes, just what was good, what could I take away, how might I implement that, how might I use it, and then lead that into that development experiment, and then feel a different experience. As I say, I share this is how I build and think about all my programs, is based on this sort of academic research in terms of how learning works. So, my first question to you is, what does sales mean to you? Now, this isn't an interactive session, so I'm going to have to answer that for you. But what does sales mean to you? So often when I ask this question, there's negative connotations. There are people that are salespeople and they live and breathe and love the word sales. But for the rest of us, it can often mean, you know, sort of a negative feeling, a negative connotation. And especially in the sort of the medical practice, when we mention the word sales, it does generate sometimes sort of the wrong feeling. And so we very much think of sales as about being of service. It's about really understanding the client, understanding who they are. And the ethical sales, in terms of how we think about it, is about delivering to our clients what they require, what they want, what they need. And so the premise of everything we do from a sort of SalesMD is very much about thinking about what can we do to service our customers? How can we be of more service? How do we really understand what's important to them and not just assume? And the other piece around sales is because sometimes we do have this negative connotation, is that we sometimes think, okay, I don't want to be a salesperson. And Chad mentioned it earlier. Yes, I'm fortunate enough to have worked with Google and Adobe. I've flown the world training their teams. But what's always interesting is I work with the sales team, I work with the sales leaders. They kind of know they're in sales because sales is in their title. When you're the patient care coordinator, when you're a nurse, a surgeon, the front desk, the receptionist, everyone is in sales from the moment that phone rings. So Advice Media do a fantastic job. They delivered you the lead, the phone rings as a web inquiry, but now you've got to do your bit. And at the moment you pick up the phone, the moment you handle that web inquiry, whether we like it or not, we're in a sales situation. And this is, for me, not about selling something that someone doesn't want. It's about, as I say, being of service, but we are in that sales process. And if we don't learn how to do it professionally and ethically, we then end up falling into the trap that I see very often of doing it the wrong way and probably doing the things that you don't want to do and don't like being done to you from what you think is a salesperson. So it's sort of around the wrong way. Not having the training ends up you do the wrong thing. Having the training means you become of service, and it's not what we think sales is. So I always start here because sales does bring those thoughts to bear, and we need to address those. This leads into a saying I have: the relationship that you have with the customer is the only thing your competitor cannot copy. And I do understand in that medical space, the doctors, the nurses, they're constantly sharing best practices in terms of how to do procedures, how to do operations, and that's absolutely right. We should be continuing to share those. And what that means, and again, if we then add sort of the equipment suppliers, what that means is what you do, the surgeon, the provider down the road can do the same thing. With the modern influx of non-surgical procedures and the use of lasers, etc. Again, if you buy the laser, you can offer that same service. So what then differentiates you? And the problem, if we're not careful, is price becomes the differentiator. We then just chase the number down. And that's not necessarily good for the practice because, these machines, your education, the journey is not a cheap journey. And so if we're competing on price, our margins suffer, the business suffers, the practice suffers, and we're not making money. And so if in this world where everything is the same, what can we do differently? And that therefore the relationship that you have with the customer is the one thing that your competitor cannot copy. If you do this exquisitely, if you do this better than anyone else, you build that relationship now and in the long term. And that is how we then start to grow a practice. That's how we start to have a profitable practice and profitable business. Let's jump in a little bit in terms of some of the sales elements. Why do people buy? There's two reasons. They have a want and they have a need. And I think we're probably very familiar with those two words, but what do they actually mean? What is a want versus what is a need? A want is emotional. The need is rational. So let's simplify that. If everything's the same between different providers, then they can have their need satisfied through different providers and go and choose where they go. The want, therefore, is the emotional bit. That's where the saying comes, people buy from people. People buy from people they like, people buy from people they trust. So again, that relationship piece becomes the differentiator. Now, in elective medicine, you could say, well, no one needs any of these things, they want it. And there's elements of truth around that, but there's elements where actually they do need some of these things. They need to feel confident. They need to, have that hope again. They need to experience life how they may have experienced 10 years ago, 20 years ago, when they did have different levels of confidence, or for whatever reason. So there are needs, not just wants, in that sort of approach. But people make decisions emotionally. They justify them rationally. So again, we need to be satisfying the wants and the needs. And I'll give you an example. I was working with one practice, and they did a number of breast augmentations. Their sort of green sheet had 10 questions in terms of some of the factual elements around a breast augmentation. What is their current cup size? What do they want it to be going forward? Did they have children? How many children? Did they breastfeed? It was all very factual, and it was very much dealing with the needs in terms of where are they, where do they want to be, what then needs to happen. There was no emotion during that part of that sort of consult process. And actually, we were able to implement some very nice questioning in terms of, where are they, where do they want to be? And turning that into a more of an emotional question didn't just get out the needs in terms of the facts and the rational, logical part of the conversation. It brought out all of the emotions. It brought out this was, the children had gone to college. This was her time in her life to do these things. This was about some time for her and her next chapter. And you brought out all of this emotion, which becomes very critical and in terms of understanding their wants and their needs. And again, when I go into practices, I often hear, we do that, I get that. And then I sort of push back and say, if we're doing those things, why is the conversion rate nationally at 40%? Why are 6 out of 10 people, walking away from your practice and going elsewhere? Because there's something that we're missing in that customer journey, that patient experience, that we're not getting 100% right. And the bit for me that's missing is we're not selling to them in a way that they want to buy. I want to introduce the sales conversation. So this is built up of 30 years in various sales situations, and as Chad said, the last few years I've been focused on the aesthetic medical space. The sales conversation applies to any sales situation. It's about following the right steps in the right order. Again, one of the things that I think we make a mistake in in the elective medicine space is the patient comes in, or a potential patient comes in, and we've seen this person, not necessarily this particular person, but we've seen this situation, let's say, hundreds of times before. They say a few things, we straight away know this is where they are, this is what they need doing, and now let me tell you what the treatment plan is, let me share with you what we're going to do. And we shortcut the consult process, and we're not selling to them. And again, I come back to this about ethical selling. It's not about getting someone to do something they don't want to do. It's helping them through the journey such that they can make the right decision. But we jump in with giving them the solution, the answer to their problems. But we haven't taken them on that journey with us for them to choose, you as their provider. So let's look at that process. So the sales conversation. The first step is open. If they come into the practice, or maybe they've had a consult and we're phoning them back to sort of move them forward, there's always an open stage. Some of that is, hi, how are you? How are things? If we know them already, so that's that sort of softer approach. But at some point we need to sort of okay, why are we talking? So this is easy to understand, for example, if we are phoning back after a consult and we want to understand, have they made a decision? So the purpose of my phone call today is you came in for a consult, interested to understand what are your thoughts, etc., etc. So that's the open stage of the sales conversation. It can be quite short, but it sort of sets the tone for the rest of that whole conversation. The second step is the questioning stage. It's very important we understand what is important to them. What are their wants? What are their needs? And so we ask questions. And I always say question, 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 question. And when you think you've asked all the questions you can, ask another question. Now, there's always a balance here because you need to understand what their wants and what their needs are. But there's also the other side, which is their side in terms of they probably want to get into what is the treatment, what could you do? So there is a piece where they want to push the pace into finding out more. And then also finding out more means how much is this going to cost me? The problem if they drive it too quickly is you haven't gone through fully understanding what's really important to them. And that doesn't mean they're not going to buy. However, what it does mean is you don't understand fully why they buy if they do. The other side to that is if they don't buy, when you then start following up with them, you've got no reason to talk to them. You haven't got that, that understanding of who they are, what's important, what are their needs, etc. You haven't got that sort of foundation to build off. So again, question, 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 question. Once we've done the questioning, that's where we can do the education piece, because again, especially in the medicine space, there is a piece of education, in terms of some of the procedures, some of the surgeries, etc. There is that piece around educating the client. We don't always have to educate, but it is there within the framework, within this sales conversation. There is a part where we may choose to educate the customer. As we come round on that sales conversation, there is the suggestion stage. Now, this is the piece in that process where you make the suggestion. This is, based on what you've told me, this is what I would recommend. Now, straight away, I haven't even finished, in that sales process, there is the person that takes the phone call, there's the patient, potentially a patient care coordinator, there's the nurse, there's the provider, there's a doctor. There are a number of people, and so there's an element where some of this flows between different people. So there is a piece where some of it you may do all of this yourself, some of it may be you're passing different pieces to different people in that process. But again, we have to be thinking about the sales conversation as individuals, thinking about the sales conversation as a team, as that customer goes through the journey. But the suggestion stage, that's where we're making the suggestion in terms of this is what we would recommend. There's two pieces here in terms of psychology from a customer's buying point of view. If you've fully understood their wants and their needs, you've fully understood their requirements, you want to tell them that you fully understand that. And the sentence you use is, based on what you've told me. I'll just repeat that, based on what you've told me. Now, what that says is, I've asked you a bunch of questions, I've listened to your answers, and based on those answers that you've given me, based on what you've told me, this is what I'm suggesting that we do. And again, the providers, the surgeons, they're going to bring in their own expertise as well in terms of making those recommendations. But you start with the line based on what you've told me. I also appreciate we're all very different. We're human beings, and it's important to be authentic. So if you don't like that line based on what you've told me, Find the line that you do like, that it matches you, your style, your personality, but you do want to sort of lead with something that says, I've heard what you've said, now let me make the suggestion. The second line in the suggestion stage is, and what this means to you. I'll repeat that, and what this means to you. What we're doing here again is, so based on what you've told me, I would recommend we do this, X, Y, and Z. And what this means to you is, and then you can sort of lead with what I call the benefit statements, but you can refer back to what they've already told you is important to them through the questioning. So let's just say, for example, they're looking for this, it doesn't matter what it is, they're looking for something in January, but their son is getting married in March in Paris. So based on what you've told me, I would recommend this, and what this means to you is you'll be totally healed, totally ready to fly, and be looking fantastic for your son's marriage in Paris in March. And that sort of closes the whole loop. So the suggestion stage is about playing back to them what they've told you, but making recommendations first on what they've told you, and then playing back to them what is important, again showing that you've understood, you've listened, and your recommendation is based on their wants and their needs. The final part then of the sales conversation is close. And I don't mean necessarily close the deal. I don't mean, you have to schedule them there and then. Customers will schedule, and so it's always good to sort of understand what your same day conversion rate is. But it's about gaining commitment to what you've suggested. So it could be, and I've seen this, is based on what I've told you, I'd recommend this. What this means to you is this. I actually think it would be good for you to go and discuss this with your partner, go away, go and think about things. There's a couple of concerns that we've highlighted, etc., etc. The close is gaining commitment to your suggestion. So that may be something you put out there as your suggestion, and you want sort of their commitment. Yeah, I agree with you that is the way forward, that is the approach. And, as I say, it's not necessarily closing the deal, it's gaining that commitment to your suggestion that the next step is to do what we've suggested. So, open, question, educate, suggest, close. I just want to jump a little bit more into the question stage, because that is one of the areas, and I've seen this within practices, but I see it with sales teams, is the area that sometimes we're weak in, is asking the questions. And so I just want to introduce you to a couple of tools to get you thinking about what type of questions to ask. At this stage, at the question stage, we should be asking open questions. And open questions are who, what, when, where, why, how. What it means is if I start the question with any of those words, the customer, the other person, has to speak. So I'll give an example. Is the weather nice today? All you can answer to that question really is yes or no. And so I could ask that question. You could say, yes, it is, no, it isn't. But I have no idea what the weather is like where you are. All I know is the weather is nice for you today and the weather is not nice or not nice for you today. I've elicited no information. Replace that same question with what's the weather like today? And I start getting some answers. It's raining, I've got blue skies, it's cold, it's warm. I'm getting information, I'm eliciting sort of stuff that is important to understanding what's going on. What do you like about the weather? What's your favourite weather? Again, I'm now starting to get into more detail. And so the key is open questions, especially at the sort of early stages of the conversation is, who, what, when, where, why, how. So one of the things I'd like you to take away as when you go from here is not just that sales conversation model, but listen to your next conversation when you're having a consult. Listen to the types of questions you're asking. And what you'll pick up on is you're probably asking more closed questions than you think you do. Now, people generally are quite nice. You ask a closed question, is the weather nice today? Sometimes they go, yes, the sun's out, it's nice temperature, and they will talk. So that's great, they can help you out. But there are people that will go, is the weather nice today? Yes. And it's really awkward because you then got to ask the next question and you've got nothing to go on other than the answer yes. And so sales becomes far more about communication and having a really great conversation with people because you're asking them questions and they're talking. And I'll give another example. Let's say we're all together and I said, let's go and have a drink this evening. And I spend an hour talking about myself. What do you think of me? Now, I know I've done this many times with live audiences. I'm self-centered, I'm egotistical, it's all about me, etc., etc. And whilst, if I did do that, it would be a great story, I'm sure. I'm joking. But it's boring. People don't want to hear about me. But if I were to spend that same time asking you questions, not in a sort of interrogationary way, but in an inquisitive, wanting to understand and appreciate who you are, that makes you feel good. It makes you feel special. It makes you feel listened to. And again, that's what sales is about, is making them feel the best they can. And that's not just in terms of what they're having done, it's in terms of how you work with them through that whole journey. And we do that again by being, as I say, inquisitive, understand who they are, what's going on in their lives, what's happening. And we find the most information in the nicest way by asking open questions as opposed to closed. So again, as you go away from this session, just listen to your questions. If you find yourself asking those closed questions, quite often all you need to do is just change the start. I'll give my same example. Is the weather nice today? Yes, no. What's the weather like today? Same question, but it's now just got the word what on the front, and you then are engaging more in a conversation. I studied sales a lot, both as a practitioner, but also academically. Asking questions and listening differentiates the best salespeople from the rest. So when we think about what makes a great salesperson, this is not about all the things that we think, it's about asking questions and listening. That makes the best. And if you didn't sign up to be a salesperson, great. Because I'm not going to teach you to be a salesperson. I'm going to teach you to help and serve your customers better by implementing professional sales tools and techniques, and really about asking questions, listening, and matching what their wants and needs are to your capabilities as a practice. A couple of final slides in terms of the approach. So we've got the what, when, why, we've got the open questions. Start with big, broad, open questions. So those big open questions, they really uncover the motivation of the individual. You then start to ask specific open questions and you start to understand the detail of what's important to them. And finally, you can ask definitional questions. And I'll give an example of a definitional question is they can often say something that they want to feel fantastic. But what does the word fantastic mean to them? And so quite often it's important to dig deep on those definitional questions, because people will use that word and you will have a different meaning or need to understand what does that word mean for them. So seek meaning when they say, I want to feel fantastic. Well, what is fantastic? What does fantastic look like, feel like, taste like, smell like to you? So think of the questioning funnel. You've got the what, when, why, but we want to uncover their motivation, we need to understand the detail, and we need to seek meaning as we go through that funnel. So, in summary, open, question, educate when necessary, make your suggestion as to what you propose is the next step, based on what you've told me and what this means to you, and then we close. And close is the time when we do use those close questions, because you do want to narrow the conversation at that stage into yes or no answers.